Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie O.
And I'm Louisa Pilbeam. Our top stories. The death toll in the Californian wildfires rises to 10 as officials warn strengthening winds could further fan the flames.
Our other headlines, 2024 was the hottest year on record, according to the European Union's Climate Monitor. We'll be assessing what all this means for countries around the world.
Britain's finance minister travels to China in a bid to boost trade amid economic troubles in the UK.
And all roads lead to Detroit, though the city's motor show is changing gear this year.
The death toll from the wildfires burning out of control in Los Angeles has risen to 10. Firefighters continue to battle several blazes for the fourth day as high winds continue to spread the flames. More than 180,000 people have been ordered to leave their homes, with another 200,000 under evacuation warnings.
It's the most destructive fire in the city's history. Entire neighborhoods have been reduced to ash. President Biden says no expense will be spared to support the affected communities.
The federal government will cover 100% of the cost for 180 days. This is going to pay for things like debris and hazard material removal, temporary shelters, first responders' salaries, and all necessary measures to protect life and property. I'm leaving this office very shortly, but it's not about the politics. It's about giving people some sense of security that we're going to be able to get this under control, but it's going to take time.
Our correspondent Tony Waterman is in Los Angeles for us. Tony, what is the situation on the ground?
Well, Louisa, Jamie, the sun is now rising over a very anxious, a very weary, and a very devastated Los Angeles. If you take a look here over my shoulder, that plume of smoke is from the Palisades fire. That is the largest fire that is blazing right now. It has burned through more than 8,000 hectares of land. It has destroyed, officials say, more than 5,000 structures, including entire neighborhoods. And officials are saying that at this point, that fire is just 6% contained. But firefighters are really working nonstop to try to bring not just the Palisades fire under control, but the Eaton fire, the Hearst fire, the Lydia fire, and now the Kenneth fire, a new blaze that erupted late on Thursday afternoon. But the efforts of firefighting on the ground here were complicated overnight because there was this pickup in winds. There were gusts in some of the mountainous areas that peaked at 130 kilometers per hour. That is above the threshold for hurricane force winds. Those winds are expected to die down Friday into Saturday, but the Santa Ana winds, which were what fueled this fire to begin with, they are expected to pick up again on Sunday into early next week. It is the winds that are the most troublesome thing. They send these embers spreading across parts of Los Angeles, which is very dry. There's no humidity here. It's very lush because there was this massive rain event in the past couple of years that brought up a lot of the vegetation that is now dried out and is like kindling. So it's the winds that are the biggest concerns. But as you mentioned, about 400,000 individuals either under an evacuation order or an evacuation warning. And for those that are still in their houses, a lot of them are without electricity. They don't have water. They have to boil their water because it's likely contaminated. And at this point, the National Guard troops have been called in and are on the ground to kind of help with the efforts, because what is happening, unfortunately, in this very vulnerable situation, there is now looting that is taking place of the houses that are still standing.
Yeah, and Tony, at this stage, what do we know about the cause of the fire and insurance claims?
Well, investigators are saying that they don't know exactly what sparked this fire. That is under investigation. There is a technology company, Whisker Labs, that has these sensors that can detect problems on the energy grid. They are saying that they detected some early problems, but that all needs to be investigated. But it is no, big surprise here in California that the state is in an insurance crisis. There are hundreds of thousands of people that cannot find affordable, comprehensive coverage. There's a number of insurers, including State Farm, which is the state's largest home insurer, that have either pulled out of the state, are not renewing policies, or they are limiting their offerings because of the high risk of fire. Unlike hurricanes, which are easy to some extent for insurers to model, fires are very difficult, and that increases the risk. And the big concern is that with the extent of this damage, one estimate putting it at $50 billion, that there's going to be a continued exodus of insurance providers. And in fact, the insurance commissioner of California has now just barred insurance companies from canceling or abandoning areas in and around the largest fires of Palisades and also Eaton for a 1-year period. But after that, it's anybody's guess. There is a state-run insurer of last resort, but that is a program that would be absolutely bankrupted by the tens of billions of dollars in insurance claims that are likely to come along with these fires.
Okay, Tony Walshman in Los Angeles, thank you very much. And our correspondent Ediz Tianzan spoke to residents of Pacific Palisades who returned home to find their houses and businesses destroyed.
A break from destructive winds allowed firefighting planes to take off once again, as residents of the Palisades in the Los Angeles area wait anxiously to get back into their neighborhood to see what's left of their homes. Ram Miller lost his family home of 25 years.
Certainly we weren't prepared for something of this magnitude. And I think that they were so overwhelmed with the fires, so concentrated and so large in that area, with the high wind that we had, there was no possible way to fight it.
The Palisades fire is the first and biggest of multiple fires that have been raging around Los Angeles for 2 days. I'm right in front of 2 homes that have been destroyed by the Palisade fire here in Los Angeles. You can see some of the destruction still on fire, and on this side, fresh smoke is still coming out of the debris. This home has been completely leveled, and it's not alone. I am completely surrounded by homes that have been burnt down. Here, take a look on the other side of the street, a car that has been almost melted down.
Now it looks like a war zone with all the cars burned. And
Carol Darsa owned a therapy center here, which she's now struggling to recognize.
oh my God, I cannot, wow, there's nothing left in here. Wow. Wow. This is the area where I went every day. 12 years. How could that be? Now it really feels like a movie. It's so weird.
It's a painful walk for Darsa, realizing that most of her neighborhood is gone.
Right there. Every year there's an Indian restaurant there. Every year we celebrate our Christmas holiday, and this was my 12th year.
Several of her clients and friends have also lost their homes. As a trauma therapist herself, she says it will take a long time for her community to recover.
It's one of those things that there's not so much one can do. It's just really a grieving process. You have to allow the grieving. You can't bypass emotions. You have to first feel the grief and the loss and the sadness. Here we're seeing some people with suitcases.
Nearly 180,000 people have come under evacuation orders as windy conditions continue to fuel the most destructive fire in the city's history. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Los Angeles.
The planet is warming to levels never experienced by modern humans. That's according to the European Union's Climate Monitor, confirming 2024 was the hottest year on record. New data shows global average temperatures last year were around 1.6 degrees above pre-industrial times, more than a century ago, before mass burning of fossil fuels. 2024 was the first year to breach the 1.5-degree global limit set by the 2015 Paris Agreement, but it doesn't yet break the international target due to it being measured by long-term average. Scientists say the record heat is mostly due to emissions of planet-warming gases such as carbon dioxide. Among extreme weather events in 2024, the world saw blistering temperatures in West Africa, intense rainfall in Central Europe, and particularly strong tropical storms hitting North America and South Asia. Well, let's talk now to Dr. Samantha Burgess, Deputy Director of the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service. Dr. Burgess, good to see you. Welcome. So 2024, hottest year on record. Just how fast is global warming accelerating?
Yes, that's right. So not only was 2024 the warmest year on record, but the last 10 years have been the warmest 10 years on record. And we've known since 1990 with the first IPCC assessment report that our world is warming at about a rate of 0.2 degrees per decade. And this rate has increased recently. So we're now at a background level of global warming of about 1.3 degrees above that pre-industrial level.
Those are pretty blunt figures and very alarming figures, obviously. Are we simply out of time? And if not, how much time do we have to make any difference?
So the reality is it's never too late, and the consequences will only get worse the later we stabilise our climate. Every single fraction of a degree matters, so even if we do exceed the 1.5 degree level of the Paris Agreement over the long-term average, the next target should be 1.6 degrees rather than default to 2 degrees.
Which parts of the world are most at risk? Obviously, tonight's programmes around the world are dominated by California being ravaged by wildfires, but I mean, very clearly, these are not isolated incidents.
That's right. So everywhere on our planet, unfortunately, is already being impacted by climate change, but it then depends on where you are on our planet as to what type of events your location is more susceptible to. So there's areas like California and much of Australia and Mediterranean regions that are much more susceptible to wildfires, but others have much higher flood risk, for example.
Does anyone listen to you? Do you ever think that? I mean, is the scientific community being listened to by global leaders?
The scientific evidence has never been more clear, and ourselves and the other data producing centres around the world are communicating very frequently on what the climate monitoring data is telling us. There are very strong voices. For example, Antonio Gutierrez has come out today to say the blazing temperatures of 2024 need to be met by trailblazing climate action. So I think there is that recognition there of the science, and the reality is that all countries around the world committed to the Paris Agreement in 2015. So that was global leaders committing to climate action to limit global temperatures below that 1.5 degree level.
For those of us who are not distinguished scientists like you, or presidents or prime ministers, it's very easy to feel powerless in this conversation. What can individuals do, if anything?
Yeah, so individuals can do a lot, and that's one of the important things. That a very easy thing to do is to look at where you invest. So where is your money, and is it in an institution that follows your philosophy of environmental causes, or is it still investing in fossil fuel companies? There's many other things that individuals can do to take action at individual and community level, and it's not for scientists to dictate what they should be, but I think having conversations, if this is an important issue to you, hearing what other people are doing inspires people to say, actually, I can do that, I can make that change in my household as well.
Dr. Samantha Burgess, Deputy Director of the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, America at work. US job figures beat expectations, bolstering the case for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates more slowly.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
You might think you are better informed in an information age. The fact is, people are more often misled by misinformation. You might think every voice is heard in a digital world. The fact is, many nations and peoples are still underrepresented. And data poverty shuts out many. We at CGTN are committed to transcending the information gap and the digital divide. CGTN, bridging nations and civilizations. CGTN, see the difference.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. The United States labour market soared past expectations in December, bolstered by new jobs in healthcare, retail and government. The data came in the last jobs report before Donald Trump takes office again. Well, our correspondent John Terrett is in New York for us. John, what's going on with these December jobs then?
Well, it turns out in the month of December, the last month of the year, the US went on a gang-bustering hiring spree. Just, we'll have you, we'll have you, we'll have you, will you, not going to have you, we'll have you. Every company doing it, apparently. And the jobs that were most being taken on were those in leisure and healthcare, more than 40,000. Healthcare of 40,000. It was leisure and hospitality, of course, what I meant to say. Hospitality and leisure, and then healthcare, both of those more than 40,000, retail more than 40,000. Now, I'm not sure that these are greatly paid jobs, some of them. I think healthcare probably is, but the others I'm not too sure about. But let's leave that to one side. It shows that the US economy is very solid at this time, whereas others in the world are less solid. The range for today was somewhere between 120,000 new jobs and 268,000 new jobs, and it came in at 256,000 at the higher end of that. That's more than 250,000 jobs, isn't it? In just the month of December. Pretty extraordinary when you think about it. And then November's was actually revised downwards a little bit to 212,000 from 227,000. But the unemployment rate was at 4.1%, down from 4.2% in November. So what does all this mean? Well, it means, as I said, the economy is pretty solid. I mean, job creation is clearly going on. I mean, yes, there are some people being laid off, but it's not at drastic levels, certainly yet. Consumer sentiment is pretty strong, although I noticed today's publication did have it down slightly. And that's one of the reasons we're going to see the market selling off in just a second when I show you. Also, of course, inflation is tumbling from the high of 9.1 to where it is now, somewhere between 2 and 3%. I don't think the housing market's doing too well because interest rates are still too high. Mortgages are at 7 or 8%, so no one wants to leave their 3% mortgage behind and buy another home. But generally speaking, things are pretty good. The Federal Reserve has done what it wanted to do, which is to land the high inflation crisis with a very, very gentle bump. It's pretty much a Goldilocks economy. Now, this begs the question, why would incoming President Trump want to disrupt all of this with tariffs on China and Canada and Mexico and now the European Union? I'll just leave that hanging in the air because those tariffs are very much in danger of disrupting this Goldilocks economy, and he seems set on it. We'll see what happens after the 20th. In the meantime, the Federal Reserve will make a decision on interest rates on the 29th. of this month, and all of this means that it's less likely to cut interest rates again, more likely to pause, and there may be fewer interest rate cuts in the whole of 2025 than was originally thought. The minutes earlier this week suggested there would be 2. There may now just be 1. So it all puts everything here into the red, especially the NASDAQ. And the reason for this is that those technology companies, they're still pretty leveraged, you see, because they're startups in many cases. So they still have a lot of debt. So if there was to be an interest rate cut, that would help them. And there is now less likely to be one. So for that reason, we have the Dow down 641 points. The NASDAQ, a huge sell-off, 393 points. That's almost 2%. The S&P 500 down 93 points. Of course, the other end of the scale, the bonds, the yields there are soaring at the moment. And I noticed crude oil is up 3% as well, which is a big jump in the last 24 hours or so. $76 a barrel here, 78.65 for Brent, which is the global benchmark out of the North Sea. So, you know, it's very difficult to explain, really. Great economy, bad for stocks, it seems.
Not difficult to explain when you're on the job, John. You do a very good job. And TikTok, let's try and explain that one, could you? TikTok in court.
Supreme Court, United States, no higher authority in the United States. They are the ones that decide everything, and what they decide is final. And so they are right now in Washington, D.C., very close to the Congress there, hearing oral arguments from both sides about whether or not this ban, which is legal tenure here, will kick in or not on the 19th of January. Now, it was a hastily arranged session. It's going on at this very minute. The Supreme Court does not do TV. You know, it's not like me trying to get on television as much as possible. They don't want that. But they do have an audio feed, and I've been listening. And I should have said, when I was on with you earlier on, I should have said the best place to listen to this is on TikTok itself. They're broadcasting it. So many people are broadcasting the oral arguments, so you can listen if you are interested. It's very complicated, though. I wouldn't bother between you and me, but anyway, whatever. The thing is that they're hearing to see whether or not companies like TikTok and Apple will be allowed to host TikTok on their sites after the 19th. And the arguments in favor of the ban are that it is in breach of national security, potentially. The Supreme Court is always very respectful of those arguments, so you must bear that in mind. Now, the argument against the ban is that it's unconstitutional, goes against the First Amendment, free speech, and all of that. And that always plays well with the justices as well. So we simply don't know what they'll decide. Trump and Biden are at odds. Biden's in favor of the ban. Trump wants it overturned. He's got plenty of followers on TikTok. Hint, hint. He may intervene after he gets into office on the 20th. We'll see. What I cannot tell you because nobody knows, is when the Supreme Court will make a ruling on this. It might be today, it might be over the weekend, might be next week. It could be even June or July, which is when they tend to do those things. So we just don't know. In the meantime, of course, ByteDance says that TikTok is absolutely not for sale, and the ban is looming on the 19th, one day before the inauguration of incoming President Trump. Oh, by the way, can I take 10 more seconds and tell you? The hush money case in New York, 34 counts, Trump found guilty. The judge, Juan Michon, has just offered him and given him an unconditional discharge. And that means all the cases against former President Trump have now, in one way or another, collapsed and gone away. Guys?
OK, John, we appreciate you bringing us that extra news as well. John Terrett in New York, thank you.
Elon Musk has interviewed the leader of Germany's far-right party amid accusations of political meddling in an audio-only conversation on his X platform. The world's richest man urged Germans to vote for the AfD parties in elections after a wide-ranging chat.
Only AfD can save Germany. End of story. And people really need to get behind AfD, and otherwise things are going to get very, very much worse in Germany.
Elon, it's a complete new situation for me, that I just can have a normal conversation and I'm not interrupted or negatively framed, how that has been in the media the case in the last 10 years, which is completely ridiculous.
Our correspondent Peter Oliver reports now from Berlin.
Probably easy to break it down into three reasons why the world's richest man is concerning himself with federal elections here in Germany, as well as paying keen attention to parties in the United Kingdom as well. Break it down to ideological reasons, business reasons and personal connections. Ideologically, he's gone for those political parties, both in the United Kingdom with Reform UK and here in Germany with the Alternative for Deutschland, the AfD, who put themselves across as defenders of free speech, that want to remove government regulation, want to halt the amount of immigration into countries, and who uphold traditional family values. Both AfD and Reform would say that that's pretty much their raison d'etre. Business-wise, Elon Musk has huge and wide-scaping operations from Tesla, Starlink, SpaceX and X, the social media platform in Europe. Particularly when it comes to Germany, he spoke at length about wanting to be able to remove some of the red tape and the bureaucracy that exists here. And on a personal level, he has a grandmother that's from the United Kingdom, which may explain his interest in that country. And here in Germany, of course, he does have the huge Tesla plant, which is part of his business empire in Brandenburg. And he also spoke at length with Alice Weidel about removal of red tape and the difficulties of doing business in Germany. We were expecting some real shocking revelations from this chat, though. It hasn't really materialized like that. Essentially, it was 76 minutes, just over an hour and 15 minutes of two people that certainly didn't seem to have any real connection, any real spark. One of the controversies that has come out of it, though, is Alice Weidel used her chat to say that Adolf Hitler and the Nazis were socialists and communists in her eyes. Even a cursory glance at the writings and speeches of Hitler would dismiss that, and it has been seen as being disingenuous to the socialists and communists of Germany, who were among the first to be arrested and put into camps by the Nazi regime. Ultimately, though, it ended up being a 76-minute chat about the Nazis, about life on Mars, and about the existence of gods, and it ended really rather abruptly. But yeah, as for the why, I think you'd have to ask Elon Musk himself, but those fairly decent reasons why he'd be wanting to get involved in German politics and European politics. I can tell you, though, he isn't been that welcomed by many of the other parties.
Meanwhile, a Danish member of parliament has told CGTN she believes Donald Trump's interest in Greenland is a PR stunt.
Denmark's Prime Minister says she's asked to speak to the US President-elect about his remarks on taking control of the Arctic territory, possibly by force. The US Embassy in Copenhagen says there are no current plans to increase its military presence in Greenland. This is what the Danish MP, Aya Chemnitz, told our correspondent Yoloap David.
Young kids. Greenland is not for sale, and Greenland will never be for sale. I think it was a PR stunt, and American tourists, Canadian tourists are very welcome in Greenland. It's important that all decisions that has to do with Greenland is something that we're being involved in. So I think just suggesting that you can control or own a country, own our country, is something that we're against.
And our correspondent Yoloap David is in Copenhagen. Yolo, what more did she have to say?
She had plenty to say, not just about, of course, the diplomatic row between Denmark and the United States, but also for Greenland and the Greenlanders. Now, she's one of just 2 members of parliament out of 179 in the Danish parliament. So she and her colleague represents the 50-odd thousand people who live, the Inuit people who live in Greenland. And she said that people were scared and they felt unsafe, and that this rhetoric by Donald Trump needs to be reflected on in a calm way. But she also had some very interesting comments in terms of defense, the defense of Greenland. And she said that she didn't really want more American bases in Greenland, or indeed NATO. What she was asking for was for Denmark to actually spend more of its armed forces in terms of aircraft and shipping to try and protect and patrol Greenland. Now that's interesting because there is some kind of home rule, and there is a parliament in Greenland for local issues like policing and housing and education and so on, but foreign policy and defense remains with the Danish government. So that is quite interesting, and it shows that the Arctic region now is increasingly important, not just for its strategic location or the potential minerals, but also because of the ice cover is receding and disappearing. And this is what she says about Denmark and increasing its budget in terms of Denmark, what she would like to see in the future.
This is not necessarily a matter of budget. This is a matter of political will. And I think in many ways it's important to defend the area around Greenland. I think especially the area between Greenland, Iceland and UK is something that we're focusing especially on. But I also think that it would be much better to have a better defense paid by the Danish government together with the Greenlandic government than have an American military presence, I would say, in Greenland.
So it's not so much about having an increased American presence, but also to be aware that other powers, Russia, China and so on, are also interested. And there was the Danish defense minister actually conceded that Greenland had been neglected by Denmark. So that will be interesting in terms of how it has enough money in terms of budget for Greenland, as well as its defense budget for NATO, which are two entirely different budgets here in Denmark. And of course, it's strategic, of course, Greenland in terms of the route of missiles. If they were fired between the two great powers in that part of the world, then Greenland is on that route. Now this will call for lots of delicate diplomacy in the future, not just by Denmark, one feels, and that's why Aya Kemit's comments will be looked at, I think, in many, many capital cities from what she told us earlier today. And we will hear far more about this, I think, in the coming months, because there is an election in Greenland in April.
Yolo, thank you for that. Our correspondent Yolo Abdavid in Copenhagen.
More policies to boost economic growth this year. That's the pledge from China's Ministry of Finance.
The commitment was made in a press conference reviewing economic performance in 2024. Our correspondent Tao Chu-Feng reports.
China's Ministry of Finance says although the fiscal revenue and expenditure data for 2024 are still being compiled, it would describe China's economic performance in 2024 as generally stable. The economy was boosted after a package of fiscal policies was implemented in the later half of the year. This resulted in a positive growth rate of fiscal revenue, which showed continuous improvement through September, October, and November.
First, the overall trend is improving, starting in October with the implementation of the package of the incremental policies. The economy is rebounding. Second, the goal of achieving a balance between revenue and expenditure is attainable. Third, key areas have received strong support, with expenditures in sectors such as education, agriculture, forestry, water, social security and employment, as well as housing security.
The ministry also says economic policies for 2025 will be even more proactive, while giving full consideration to medium and long-term fiscal sustainability.
I think the more proactive approach can be understood from four aspects. First, increasing the fiscal deficit ratio. Second, expanding the scale of debt. Third, ensuring key expenditures and optimizing the structure of fiscal spending. Fourth, improving the efficiency of funds with greater focus on goal-oriented and performance-driven allocation and use of fiscal resources.
The ministry also revealed that China's fiscal deficit will increase significantly in 2025. It says China has ample room for debt expansion, as its government debt ratio is significantly lower than those of major economies and emerging markets. Additionally, government debt is backed by high-quality assets, and the real interest rates on Chinese government bonds are below the country's actual economic growth rate. The exact deficit ratio number will be released at a later time. For 2025, China's Ministry of Finance says that it will continue to monitor the country's latest economic trends and adjust policies as needed. It also emphasized that there are plenty of tools to support China's economic development. 曹楚峰 CGTN 北京。
China's central bank has temporarily stopped buying government bonds due to what it describes as persistent excess demand. The decision comes after yields on the Chinese government bonds hit record lows in recent weeks. The bank said it would resume buying them at an appropriate time, depending on supply and demand in the market.
The Shanghai-based toy maker Blocks Group saw its shares rise by more than 80% on its Hong Kong market debut. The firm's $2 billion IPO attracted huge demand from investors. The company specializes in making action figures such as Transformers and Ultraman.
The world's largest chip manufacturer has posted record revenues of $26.3 billion for the fourth quarter, up over 38% on the year. TSMC, which made semiconductors for some of the world's biggest tech companies, has benefited from a boom in artificial intelligence. This brought its total annual revenue to just under $88 billion, its highest since going public.
Boeing and Google are the latest U.S. multinational companies to donate money to President-elect Donald Trump's 20th of January inauguration fund. The aviation giant said it would give $1 million, while Google pledged a similar amount. Boeing said it was continuing a tradition established over the past 3 presidencies. General Motors, Ford, Microsoft and Meta have also said that they will donate.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Britain's Finance Minister Rachel Reeves travels to China in a bid to boost economic ties between the two countries.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, in the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Louisa Pilbeam. Our top stories: the death toll in the Californian wildfires rises to 10 as officials warn strengthening winds could further fan the flames.
2024 was the hottest year on record, according to the European Union's Climate Monitor.
And United States jobs figures beat expectations, bolstering the case for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates more slowly.
UK Finance Minister Rachel Reeves is travelling to China in a bid to boost trade and economic ties. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has confirmed she will hold talks with Vice Premier He Feng in Beijing. It's the 11th China-UK economic and financial dialogue.
As Reeves travels abroad, she faces increasing pressure back home. The pound has fallen to its lowest level in more than a year, while UK borrowing costs reached the highest in 16 years.
China is seen as a key growth market for many British businesses navigating a difficult global landscape, but challenges still remain. Our correspondent Li Jinhua reports.
At this British factory, nature is packed into every capsule. Mushroom powder, carefully measured, is filled into capsules and sealed for export. They are ready to be shipped to one of the world's most vibrant markets, China. For Grass & Co., China is their first international export market as the country's wellness market booms. By leveraging China's huge appetite for e-commerce, the company aims to double its sales.
I think one of the things that's unique from a business perspective about the Chinese market is the sophistication of the e-commerce space in China. In an era where there may be tariffs introduced with America, we would like business to be able to happen in a straightforward way with China. At the moment, that's the case, and we can sell very easily using cross-border e-commerce.
The UK-China Business Council estimates over 9,000 British businesses are operating in China. A recent survey said 58% of British businesses reported they found it more challenging to operate in China in 2024. Regardless, 76 are maintaining or increasing their investment in China. Some experts say it's time for UK-China business ties to move on from past disagreements.
UK companies want to do business in China, as I think Chinese companies want to do business in the UK. But we also need to be making the case that growth in trade is good for the Chinese economy, it is good for the UK economy. And in recent years, we just haven't seen that happening. What we've perhaps let happen in the last few years is that we've allowed those differences or those areas where we don't want to see so much foreign investment, we've allowed that to dominate the whole relationship, and I don't think that's right.
Rachel Reeves said she is seeking a pragmatic relationship with China, the UK's fifth largest trading partner. Since the Labour government took office in July last year, the UK and China have been reassessing their bilateral ties. The two countries' presidents met in Brazil at the G20 in November last year, while other high-level officials have visited Beijing. Now, businesses on both sides are watching to see if Rachel Reeves' visit this time will translate to smoother trade relations. Li Jianhua, CGTN, London.
Stephen Green is a member of the UK's House of Lords and the former group chairman of HSBC.
It's the first time a senior government minister, apart from a foreign secretary, has been to China for some time. It represents the end of what I think must have looked like a hiatus in terms of the relationship. And of course, to have the Chancellor of the Exchequer go there relatively soon after delivering a British budget is, I think, of profound importance. This is, of course, a new government. The new government shows every sign of wanting a pragmatic and developing relationship with China. So I think this is of a significance of a very high order.
The so-called golden age of UK-China relations, once heralded by UK Prime Minister David Cameron, was, of course, brought to a close by UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak back in 2022. Where is this UK-China relationship now, would you say?
Well, I'm not sure I think that labels are terribly helpful. So calling this a renewal of the golden era, I think, is not quite the point. The point is, I think, that both sides recognise the need for a pragmatic relationship in the context of a complicated geopolitical scene globally. We are 2 weeks away or so from a new American administration that's going to affect all of us. This is a complicated world, and the relationship between Britain and China is a complicated one. There's a history, of course, that we all have to recognise. But looking at now and going forwards, the important point is that these are both countries with important interests on the world stage and with a real need to benefit from the trade and investment opportunities that flow from a good commercial relationship.
So what would a successful visit to China look like for UK Finance Minister Rachel Reeves?
I think what she will be looking for, and I would think we should all be hoping for, is a path in the coming years of a continuing enriched and in developing trade relationship, investment flows that make sense for both countries in both directions, because these are the kinds of things that unlock what both countries need: continuing economic development, very different, of course, in all sorts of ways, but both countries need continued economic development, economic growth. The British government is very focused on the need to grow productivity in this country to meet its challenges. Well, one of the ways that productivity comes is through better and better trading.
As you alluded to, there's going to be a new US president, of course, which will present many countries with geopolitical challenges. Can the UK take advantage of that in its relationship with China?
It depends what the Americans do, of course, but if the new administration were to bring in some of the levels of tariff that President Trump has talked about, then I think the advantage potentially for Britain is to remain more open to trade, to more open to international engagement, not to be drawing up the drawbridges, to, on the contrary, being engaging as widely as possible in the world at large. In a sense, if it were to be the case, and we will see, that America pulls up its drawbridges, well, all the more reason for us to remain open.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has ended his tour of Africa. He's visited Nigeria, Namibia, the Republic of Congo and Chad. The trip continues a 35-year tradition of beginning Beijing's diplomatic calendar in Africa. Mohamed Ali Pate is Nigerian Minister of State for Health and Social Welfare.
I think the relationship of the African continent with China has been a long one. It's been a productive one in many respects. For us in Nigeria, there have been several facets of that, in trade, in investments, and in different sectors. In my own sector, in health, there are relationships that can only get better when it comes to production of local commodities, medical equipment, and trade, and also overall in terms of the infrastructural development of our country. So it's a positive moment where the relationship between China and the continent, and in particular with Nigeria, I think is getting stronger. That is the signaling. Of course, it's in the context of a global community where we've got several relationships all over the world, trying to solve the problems that are ahead of us, whether it's in health, whether it's in economy, and to grow our economy overall.
Absolutely, and you mentioned solving problems. So as Nigeria's health minister, how does Nigeria specifically benefit from this trip, and what decisions have been made?
I think it's an ongoing conversation. This is one marker, and there will be more in the period ahead. As we engage with partners from all over the world to renew our health sector, we're investing in ways that will strengthen our health system, our primary healthcare system. China has had experience with primary healthcare system that functioned, or it's upgrading our tertiary hospitals to deliver quality services for our people, or upgrading medical equipment, or producing locally products that we can use to treat patients to enhance our own health security, or in public health arena, to ensure that, in fact, we protect ourselves, our region, but also the world in terms of infectious diseases. We have these conversations, it's not only with China, but with several other parts of the world. So the way we see it is that there are issues that we deal with at the country level, and we have several partners, including China, that are engaging with us. So for us, this visit is a marker in terms of Nigeria-China relationship, and it opens further doors to continue exploring where the fit exists. But there are facets of the conversation that are, of course, outside the health sector, in trade, in infrastructure, and many other arenas.
And how can China benefit then?
Well, trade is one that benefits all parts that engage in trade. And I think each entity will have its comparative advantage in terms of what it does. For us as Nigeria, we have a large growing population. Our health sector is growing, and it's going to increase as a portion of our GDP as our economy grows. I think it is in all countries' interest to see that Nigeria has a healthier population that is able to protect itself, but also protect others, because infectious diseases know no borders. They can move from one country to the other. So from that point of view, it's in our collective interest, whether it's China, whether it's Europe, or the other parts of the world.
The number of people injured in the earthquake in China's Xizang region has now risen to 337. Rescuers are widening their search for survivors 3 days after the magnitude 6.8 quake in which 126 people died. Many of those trapped under the rubble are thought to have died of hypothermia. Nighttime temperatures in this region can reach around minus 15 degrees Celsius. Our correspondent Gong Ming reports.
According to the latest briefing, so far, Xizang has deployed 12,000 personnel from different departments involved in the rescue to carry out the search and rescue operations. A total of 407 trapped individuals have been rescued, and 14 relocation and resettlement sites have been established, and more than 46,500 disaster-affected residents have been relocated and settled. And as for now, all road sections damaged by the earthquake have been fully repaired. And also, according to the latest statistics, there has been no further increase in casualties from the earthquake. And actually, based on visits to several rescue and resettlement sites, we know that a comprehensive assessment of disaster conditions in the villages and towns has been completed. So now the current focus of relief efforts has gradually shifted to resettling and assisting disaster victims, as well as conducting follow-up inspections of damaged buildings. And due to the dispersed nature of the villages in this epicenter area, no large-scale centralized resettlement sites have been established. Instead, tents like this have been set up in safe areas within each villages.
You are watching CGTN. Still ahead. Back on the road, Detroit Auto Show returns with a peek at what we might be driving in the future.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The cleanup operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
To Global Business Europe. The Detroit Auto Show is getting up to speed after skipping 2024's event to return to its traditional January slot.
For years, the automotive world was fixed on the Detroit Expo to see the latest cars and concepts. But the show is shifting gear this year. Our correspondent Dan Williams reports.
The Detroit Auto Show is back after skipping a year in 2024, and it has also returned to its traditional January date after briefly moving to September. But this auto show, which for decades was the dominant way for automakers to reveal their new cars or concept vehicles, has changed significantly. As automakers continue the move towards more high-tech electric vehicles, the Consumer Electronics Show, or CES, has emerged as the more likely destination for new car introductions, while other automakers move towards running their own standalone events. Instead, the Detroit Auto Show has become a more consumer-friendly experience with test tracks and drive-alongs.
For us, this is a very great opportunity to connect with our consumers. So while the unveils may be happening online or off-site at other places, the consumers still need to see the vehicles, and this is the ultimate stage to do that. We have more than 500 different cars that'll be on our show floor. We've got more than 40 brands that are represented here. There really is the entire broad spectrum of automotive here under one roof. I think from a consumer standpoint, to be able to see all that at one place really is something special.
Organisers are not ruling out a return in the future of the more traditional car unveilings and news conferences. But for now, the Detroit Auto Show hopes large crowds will descend on Motor City, enjoy the hands-on activities and test tracks, and get a taste of the past, the present, and a hint of the future of the auto industry. Dan Williams, CGTN, Detroit.
The head of US car giant Ford has been telling CGTN that China is crucial for the future of the global automotive market.
The China market is perhaps the most important market in the world today. E-revs are growing fast. The electrification is starting to get more complicated than just EVs. The local brands are very powerful, and they're now the #1 exporter on the globe. And one of the key markets they're exporting to is Mexico. I think 1 out of 5 vehicles sold in Mexico are now built in China. So China is a global player in our industry. And Ford, with all of our revenue outside of US and Europe, we compete every day with our Chinese OEMs.
Now, while much of Washington, D.C. is focused on the incoming new resident of the White House, there are some other new arrivals causing excitement.
Chinese pandas Bo Li and Qingbao are making their public debut in the U.S. Capitol. Our correspondent Jim Spellman has the story.
On a cold winter day in Washington, D.C., 2 of the city's newest residents are enjoying a snack in the snow. It's male Bao Li and female Qingbao, 3-year-old giant pandas on loan from China. They arrived here in October, and for the first time, we're getting a chance to see them up close.
They're both eating well, they're both adapting to the environment, and they're doing really, really well.
Following the guidance of experts in China, the outdoor yards have been spruced up and the indoor enclosures have been fully revamped with new climbing structures and pools.
We have very close collaborations, partnerships with universities, with protected areas, with research centers and zoos in China that we've been building since the 70s.
Zookeepers say the pandas' individual personalities are beginning to emerge.
Yeah, they're definitely very different pandas. So you have Bao Li, who is just very outgoing, very interested in what the keepers are doing, always wanting attention from the keepers. And then you have Qingbao, who's more independent, a little more shy, but still does interact with us a lot. I think it could be just a male-female thing, but we're definitely getting to know them a little better.
The pandas are not yet sexually mature, but in a few years, zookeepers hope they will mate and produce offspring. Until then, they remain separated.
In the wild, pandas are strictly solitary, and they only meet each other during breeding season. And their breeding season is so short, it's usually like a 3-day meet. And so we adapt that here, where they can see each other and smell each other, but they don't go into the same exhibit with each other unless it was for breeding purposes.
Any cubs born to Bao Li and Qingbao were returned to China by age 4. China's Panda Conservation Program is helping build the global panda population.
We are building a sustainable captive population in the zoo environment. So in the future, when we have a sustainable, big enough captive population, we are able to train some of the giant panda to be reintroduced in the wild.
Preview visits have begun for members of the National Zoo who pay an annual fee, and the general public will be able to come and see the pandas beginning January 24th. The zoo expects big crowds.
Those who can't make it in person will be able to view the Panda Cam on the internet, allowing people from around the world to get to know Bao Li and Qingbao. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
And that's just about it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, and we'll be watching that Panda Cam, won't we, Jamie? Coming up next on CGTN, Erica Live. See you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. From all of the team in London, goodbye.
Goodbye.